Welcome to That Trans Geek Girl, and I am That Trans Geek Girl, Christina Tali. We have a very special show today. First, I would like to introduce my guest co-host. He's a host and DM of Gaming XP and co-host of Breaking the Fourth Wall, Matt Cruz.
Hi, everyone. How you doing tonight? Or today, I should say.
Yep, today.
Sorry.
And now, it is my pleasure to introduce my special guest, designer of role-playing games, video games known for Dungeons & Dragons module, Dark Tower, which is listed by Dungeon Magazine as one of the 30 greatest D&D adventures of all time. And incidentally, the only one not published by TSR. And the Caverns of I'm sorry if I don't say this right, Thracia? For judges.
Thracia.
Thank you. For Judges Guild, developed and designed arcade conversions for many games for Coleco, including Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. She has worked on such games as Quake, Age of Empires, and Descent, and has done work at TSR, EA, Interplay, and Ep3. I am honored to introduce 2017 Origin Hall of Fame inductee, Jennell Jaquays. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank
Yay.
you. Thank you for having me on.
So you have a very impressive resume. I know I definitely missed a lot of it. Do you want to go into more detail about it?
Let's see. I can basically go through it. I worked for Judges Guild in the late 70s. I got my start doing a fan magazine called The Dungeoneer while I was still in college. It's still, actually, the adventures for that are still in print. So we're talking since those came out in 1976. Yeah. And so, The Caverns of Thracia and Dark Tower, still in print, 1979.
Yes.
With new editions just being released in the past year, reprints. Let's see, moved to Coleco. I was the director of game design at Coleco, and then wrote it down when the video game industry collapsed in 1983, 85. Freelance for a number of years, was a cover painter for TSR. On staff, I was actually the AD&D line artist for a while. Worked on the Dragon Dice game as both cover artist and dice artist. Went to ID Software as a level designer. Worked on Quake 2, Quake 3, Quake 3 Team Arena, and then over to Ensemble Studios where I worked on Age of Empires 3 and Halo Wars. Last gig was at CCP in Atlanta, where I was the lead level designer on the World of Warcraft, World of Darkness, not Warcraft, all these worlds. World of Darkness MMO, and I left when I saw that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So now started my own game software development company with 3 other women. 5 years ago now, and then more recently went back to freelancing. That company's still going, but I've gone back to freelancing through my own company, Dragon Girl Studios, and that's pretty much where I'm at.
And what was the name of the company you started?
Oh, Old School.
Okay. So what got you into gaming and into game design?
Okay. Game design, I did that as a little girl. My brother and we used to design our own board games. In fact, I still have some of those. Glued sheets of paper together that my dad brought, the backside of photocopy pages that my dad brought home from work. And then we would draw our own large format board games. Most of them were based on exploration. So you would move your pawns around the world, try to get. Hopefully, the dice would send you someplace you wanted to go. We didn't have really good rules, and then hopefully make it back to where you started. And that was the game. They were an exploration game. I still have. I did those when I was like 11, 12 years old. I still have the board games for that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I still have them in storage. I can't get rid of some things.
I would.
I would.
Well, I've shed so much over the years. I mean, you move around a lot. You go through life. You move. You downsize, and you got to make choices.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah. So, gosh, where was I? Where was I going with that? But how did I get into it? My brother and I did this as kids. when I got into college, I made some friends who played board games like Risk and Panzer Blitz in high school. And then in college, I had the same friends, but I came across this game. My brother called me up at work. I was working at a radio station as an announcer. And he calls me up at work and he reads me these reviews for Dungeons and Dragons. And it was in a magazine called The Space Gamer. It was actually the second issue of The Space Gamer. This is fall of 1975. Well, this game sounded like something I had been looking for forever. I was loved reading fantasy, loved comic books, imagined that I wanted to be a comic book artist and writer someday back then. At the time, I was an art major in college when I found these. And this magazine, The Space Gamer, asked for submissions of art. So I just started dashing off little black and white sketches. I called them filler art or fillos. And sent them off to the magazine and they started publishing them. And, I started getting 50 cents an illustration. But double that if I took it in store credit. So I used the store credit to buy games like Dungeons and Dragons, the Greyhawk expansion.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, the first the white box and the original expansions.
Yeah.
I think I even got a copy of White Bear Red Moon from Chaos Hymn that way. Because the publisher, Metagaming Concepts, who published The Space Gamer, they also, like a lot of companies, small companies in that time, they were also a retailer, online retailer. No, excuse me, not online. Catalog mail. Catalog retailer. We didn't have online back then.
Well, that's like that was like the version of online we have today anyway.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I started submitting stuff. Eventually, they gave me some. Later on, they gave me some contracts to work on. So I started illustrating some games for that publisher. But along the way, my friends and I were looking at what was available as source material or outside material for Dungeons and Dragons at the time. Again, this is spring 1976, and there was nothing. There was literally nothing. There were a few fan magazines like Alarms and Excursions, or the Apazines and the Wild Hunt. Where fans put all their stuff together into a shared publication, and then somebody distributed it every month. Literally, it was mimeographs and ditto pages.
Right.
So that was what was out there at the time. Dragon Magazine hadn't even come into being yet. And we decided, hey, we could write our own fan magazine for this stuff. I mean, it was done for science fiction games and comics and things like that. So I said, why not for Dungeons and Dragons? So I wrote TSR and asked, hey, can we make this magazine called The Dungeoneer? Are we going to stomp on any of your trademarks? And they came back to me. Mike Carr, one of the vice presidents at the time, wrote back to me and said, no, that sounds cool. We're looking forward to seeing it. So we produced our first, it was 12 pages, digest size, that summer. And we sent off about 100 of them for free, just to people we had found on mailing lists and in the back of magazines as gamers. And this was kind of like our test marketing. Were people going to be interested in this? And believe it or not, we actually got some letters back telling, never send me crap like this again. Dungeons and Dragons is the worst thing to ever happen to gaming.
Oh, no.
No, we didn't send them anymore. But we started getting subscribers. And Jim Ward, I guess the legendary Jim Ward, was our first subscriber.
Wow.
And that kind of started things. We continued publishing the magazine through college. As it got near the end of college, I realized I had to make a decision a couple years later. Do I keep publishing this magazine, which I don't have time to do, or do I finish my art degree and graduate? The art degree one. So I sold it to someone else, and they eventually took it to Judges Guild, the people who published Dark Tower. And Judges Guild started publishing it as a kind of a semi-prozine.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I went
this
to work
is-
for them about 8 months later, 9 months later.
That's awesome.
I was gonna say, oh, if I may, for 1 second,
Go ahead.
just hearing the history is just. I'm sitting here, like I said before. This is amazing. Thank you. This is just because this is you were there on the front lines when all this started. You were the pioneers. For us to have a world to actually come together and start having a format for us to come together with our ideas and actually learn from each other and teach each other as well. So thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Yes, thank you. So my next question. So with all your designs, your maps, everything where do you normally draw your inspiration from for these?
I've got kind of I don't know if anyone else does it this way. I've got kind of a weird process. I start with inspiration from films, books, comic books, just things media input, things that interest me. And I start taking ideas. Dark Tower, which was the first commercial piece that I did for the Judges Guild, is really my idea of playing out the story Red Nails from Conan the Barbarian by Robert Howard. It's the idea of two warring factions trapped inside basically a dungeon and fighting it out over time. And that's kind of what Dark Tower was. I spun it. I took a couple of the gods from Conan that were already in Deities and Demigods, the first book, and I took Set and I took Mitra, and they became my warring faction. So there's a lot of Conan the Barbarian inspiration in that whole culture. And then I start drawing maps, making shapes and connections that seem interesting, and then coming back to those and starting to fill them with ideas. And I still do that. I found recently, I did a dungeon adventure for Swords and Wizardry recently. It's the first one I've written in about 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's been a long time. And I went back and I found a map that I had drawn while I was in college. And I took the map and the contents and just started redrawing it on my computer, and then figuring out what would be in these spaces. Or actually, I took the original designs of what was in the spaces and then started elaborating on them the way I would if I was actually designing it now. So original mid-70s D&D Monty Hall adventure, Monster Hotel.
Yikes.
And bringing it forward, adding a backstory, adding a setting, adding a flow structure, figuring out encounter pacing, and making it all work together more, I'm going to use the word realistically, but make it more seem like it all belongs together. And I ended up that got published earlier this spring in a limited edition as a fundraiser project for a friend.
Nice.
So I grab ideas from outside, bring them in, change them, mash them together, really mash them together sometimes, and then tell their story.
That's actually really interesting, because it's always nice to hear about how people get their inspiration for doing such amazing work like you do. So my next question is, you actually made that jump to video games pretty early in the infancy of like home video game systems and stuff like that. I mean, when you started working on video games, it was still the Atari 2600, the ColecoVision, systems
there was no
like that.
ColecoVision. Yeah,
there wasn't
there
even
was no ColecoVision yet.
Okay.
There wasn't one yet.
So what was it like to make that change from doing tabletop gaming to actual programming to make a video game?
Well, I'll clarify a few things. One, I didn't expect to do this. I actually didn't seek it out. My friend Mike Stackpole, who introduced me at the Hall of Fame Awards, told the story of how we met, and then how we both ended up at Coleco, literally a month later, together working. He had been, let's say, Flying Buff. This is kind of a Shaggy Dog story. Flying Buffalo, the publisher of Tunnels and Trolls, had been at an educational show in Connecticut, I think. This would have been fall 1980. The chairman of the board of Coleco came up to that booth and said, "Hey, you're making something kind of products we're trying to do with one of our products. Here, let me take your card." So that ended up leading to Mike Stackpole being brought in to work as a contract game designer on a new project that Coleco was doing in-house. And they said, "Do you know anybody else?" Well, Mike had just met me about literally within a few weeks before, and he said, "Yeah, I know Jaquays. Jaquays might be available." So he called me up, and we chatted on the phone. I called them back. And within the week, I was on a plane to Connecticut, and I interviewed with the head of the Advanced Research and Development Department after sitting all day outside his office, and literally, and said, "Okay, yeah, this sounds good. I'll take the job. Send me back home so I can get my stuff, pack, and come back." And they were like, "What? You can't start tomorrow?" No, I had a life back in Michigan that I needed to shut down, even for for 45 days.
Wow. Just so like that.
So that's how I got into working for a large East Coast toy company on electronic games.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And to give you the idea of the technology, the game we work on never came out, but it used two really hot new technologies of the day: speech synthesis chips and barcode.
Wow.
Wow.
It's funny how much technology's like just grown over the years. I mean, I look back to even when I was 10 years old, and actually, I was probably like 12 years old. My parents bought me a Nintendo for Christmas, and I remember hooking this thing up and sitting there playing Mario, thinking how like amazing this thing was, how much of an upgrade it was for my brother's Atari. I mean, now I still have it. In fact, I was just playing it the other day. I still have my Atari. I still have all those consoles, and it's funny because I'll boot it up now, and it's like I just enjoy it for the games now. I can't honestly say, wow, the graphics are amazing. For the time, yes, they were, but now it's like.
Let's say the ColecoVision graphics were roughly, and the Nintendo graphics, the first Nintendo, are roughly very similar, quite very similar.
Yeah, the nostalgia for them that's what always will take us back to them. I mean, when they were announcing the Nintendo Mini, I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. And I love the old school stuff. For me, the beginning was always the best. You know. Mm-hmm. Right now it's too much for me. I like my simple stuff.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the Nintendo goes, when I heard the Mini was coming out, I couldn't be bothered because I have an actual Nintendo, and I just feel part of the experience is trying to get the game to load each time.
Yeah, I do.
Blow on
I
it.
do understand. Blow on it. Yeah, I still have an Atom computer that Coleco produced in my storage unit. I haven't in the original box.
I'm jealous.
The box is beat the hell up, but it's still there, and it may still run. But a few years back, a fan, my actual ColecoVision, which, by the way, I had to buy. Coleco didn't give me one. My ColecoVision died probably 20, maybe even 30 years ago. And a fan recently gave me another one. I had been kind enough to sign like everything he owned Coleco that I had worked on at a retro show, and he said, I'm going to get you a ColecoVision. And a couple shows later, yeah, there he showed up with a ColecoVision, which I still have yet to run because I don't think I have an adapter for a modern television for it.
Oh yeah, the old prongs.
Is it prongs or is it like an RCA jack like the Atari?
It's actually it requires the converter, Balin converter, and then I think I've got coax connection.
Oh, okay.
But also, I haven't gotten that television in a couple years. So I have we have like one place that we've set up all our game units, just sit and not be attached since we moved back into the apartment.
So out of all the projects you've worked on, which is an extensive amount, what would you say would be your favorite project and why? Okay,
favorite project. Not just the output. Let me divide that into two categories. Okay. My favorite, the game adventure that I actually feel the best about writing, and because I made a lot of conscious decisions that resulted in how it played. First would be the Enchanted Wood from SPI for the Dragon Quest game rules. So it's a dead game system. It was almost a dead game system at the time that SPI contracted me to write it. Yeah. But I'm really proud of the way that worked out. And so much so that when TSR bought acquired the assets of SPI a few years later, when I went back to freelancing, TSR owned that property. We had done some follow-up contracts, so they owned that property. So I took bits and pieces I tried to get them to do a D&D conversion of the Enchanted Wood. They didn't go for it. But So when they assigned me the project to work on part of the Forgotten Realms, the Savage North, I took bits and pieces out of the Enchanted Wood and moved it over into the Forgotten Realms. And they are there to this day as a part of the canon of the Forgotten Realms.
Nice. So in other words, you just kind of got they said no, but you figured out a way to do it anyway.
Oh, of course. Of course. It just means I can't go and, steal it back. So that's my favorite game adventure. Going forward a number of years, I worked at Ensemble Studios on the Age of Empires 3 project. And we had just shipped Age of Empires 3 in, I think it was 2005. And we had a huge team working on it. And I was one of the artists that worked at what they call the home cities, which, to be honest, are a glorified 3D user interface. And not a whole lot more. It wasn't gameplay. It was a small city that you zoomed around in, and you could click on buildings like as buttons.
Yeah.
So, that was fun. That was a good project. But the next project, we did the expansion pack for it, which was the War Chiefs, which focused more on Native American cultures. And we were down from a huge team of between 60 and 100 people to just under 20, which included all the game designers, the programmers, the sound people, and the artists. And I was one of the artists on that. And I was really proud of what we did within 11 months on that project. It was not only a fun project to work on, we exceeded our goals for what we could get into the game. Some of that is because we voluntarily busted our chops to put in extra hours because there was things we wanted in that game that were kind of like optional. So very happy with what I did on that and how the whole project flowed.
And I will say that was a great expansion too. I've played all the Age of Empires since the first one all the way up to Age of Mythology, and I would say the War Chiefs is probably one of my favorite expansions of any of the series.
Yeah, Age of Mythology was definitely my favorite. I played that relentlessly. When I couldn't get online, that was my favorite thing just to do. Just start building up my temples, get my gods to just thrash each other. It was fun.
Age of Mythology, I worked on it as a, quote, play tester. because I was on a different project team at the time. I was on a prototyping team at that time. So everyone at Ensemble Studios had an hour at least once a week that we were required to go downstairs and sit in the playtest chairs and play. We could not escape this. Didn't matter what our deadlines were on our own projects. But as they used to say, as the head of the design team at that time on that project used to say, butts in chairs.
Oh, my goodness.
So, are you currently working on anything that we can look forward to or to playing or experiencing?
Yeah, I've made some contributions to, if you remember, the original Bard's Tale game back in the late 80s. Okay, my wife, Rebecca Heineman, was one of the programmers on that. In fact, she's like the programmer designer on Bard's Tale 3. We've been working recently with a game company called In Exile, who got the rights to do the Bard's Tale product series. And for a Kickstarter promo, premium, we're doing all 3 of the original games together in one product as to work on the Windows operating system. So it runs native in Windows. No good old games, no DOSBox. So it's actually running native in Windows. And we've done some graphics on upgrades. Not a complete upgrade. I mean, that wasn't in our budget and in our mandate. But we've upgraded the user interface. Everything plays together. We've added some more auto mapping. So I worked on that as an artist, working with old school. That's one thing.
That's awesome. I love the Bard's Tale series too. I remember playing them on my Apple II GS back in the 80s, early 90s.
Well,
so
my wife specifically programmed the Apple II GS ones. Those are her babies. Brian, what am I working on? So I did that. I've been designing miniatures, not necessarily sculpting them, but designing them.
Okay.
Otherworld Miniatures in the UK got the license to do the Dark Tower miniatures line from Judges Guild. They came back to me and said, "Would you want to design some of the other figures in the line that we don't have art for?" I was kind of like, yes.
Duh. Sorry. Sorry. Did I speak for you? I'm sorry.
No, you're
right. No, so we worked out a deal, and I took some cash and I took promise of the miniatures when they came out. So I've designed maybe a dozen figures for them, and about 2/3 of them are out right now. So look up Otherworld Miniatures; those are out there.
I'm gonna have to start get some paints.
Yeah, I've recently gotten back into painting as a hobby that I refuse to monetize.
One day I'll get back to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to retirement someday, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. I want to be semi-retired and doing something I enjoy. That's not necessarily creative. It's creative, but not work. But I'm still making work out of it because now I have my own miniatures and role-play game brand that I'm working with Effin' Cool Minis in Ohio to release. We've got a few minis that I've designed for them. Eventually, it's going to be a couple that I've sculpted out there. And the game adventures I'm writing, they're my intended publisher.
Nice.
Amazing.
All right, so go ahead, Matt.
I'm definitely gonna have to get some of her minis and put them in the game. I swear. I'm gonna have to now.
All right.
So I'm really happy with what they did. So on those.
Okay.
So last week you were inducted into the Origins Hall of Fame for your contributions to tabletop gaming.
I know.
I
know. Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing. So how does that make you feel to be honored in such a way?
I was floored. I've had to keep quiet about it for about 2 months. They were kind of hoping I would just somehow show up at Origins like I've never done, and be on site, and they would surprise me, and it didn't work out that way. In fact, I kind of even resisted taking their phone calls, but they finally got through to me, and they said, "We need you. We're going to induct you into the Hall of Fame. We think it's your time." And I was like, "What?" I mean, it's been 20 years since I've been active in the RPG industry and tabletop, and I'm just kind of like, I knew there was a chance. There was a time it was like 1994, my name was up for consideration. But somebody went and died that year and became their first posthumous induction into the industry. It was Nigel Findlay. So I'm making a little light of that. It was very tragic at the time. But yeah, that was the last time I think I knew I was being considered for it. And I left role-playing games 3 years later to go jump back into video games again. But it really wasn't expected. It feels weird. I mean, it's also looking at it that most of the people who are in the list before me are people I know personally, either as friends or former business clients or, industry peers. So I know pretty much, a good share of the people that are in there already. Like I said, yes, and I even know Gary Gygax. I knew Dave Arneson. So
Nice.
So it was very strange when I went up to take my award Saturday evening. Mike Stackpole introduced me, said some very nice things about me, talking about our history together. And I had joked before then that I was going to, lead off by mentioning that Mike used to be my roommate, which is true. But when I went up there, by the time I got up there, it was way too emotional. I knew points I wanted to deliver in a speech, and it was enough to keep from crying, just to deliver the speech. It wasn't even a speech. It was just gushing out of my heart how I felt up there. And I still kind of can't believe that I'm there.
I'm very happy that you are. If anyone, I think you've more than deserved to be in that situation.
Well, thank you.
Like I said before, you inspired a lot of us. I mean, I've had a lot of DMs over the time. The guys that I was like, where do you get these ideas? I'm like, just ideas. And I started. It was so funny because I was so against me actually DMing, and my friend was like, "You've got good ideas, just do it." So I did it. And actually, some of your stories of what I drew into the game that Christina's currently in now with the Harpers and the associates like that. And I mean, my brother's got a collection of some of your best work. I mean, he's got Howls in the Night. He's got the Ravenloft Adventure series. He's got a lot of your artwork. And I mean, when I told him, he was like, "Oh wow!" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't wait for this." And this has just been, it's been a pleasure for me because I mean, you haven't, like I said, you inspired. This is something that a lot of us have, we said, okay, we're gonna go with this. This is what this is where I got my idea from. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I say that a lot. You're welcome.
All right. Well, I know a lot of the retro games are becoming available on computer apps like Steam and Origin. So how do you feel the fact that some of your creations, some of the games that you worked on can be played by a new generation of gamer?
That's actually pretty cool. Working in the industry, one of the biggest concerns we've had over the years has been that as systems change, as they age, as the hardware dies, I mean literally dies, that a lot of the games we created over, the computer games we created over the years aren't playable anymore. And then there's this balance of where are people crossing the DMCA lines by converting older software? Are they pirating it? Because I personally believe that there is no such thing as abandonware. I mean, somebody always owns the copyrights in product, whether they're shipping it or not. And until something actually enters the public domain, it's not in the public domain. I mean, I'm a creator. I make my life off creations. If I don't believe that, I'm cutting my own throat.
I mean, to put that in perspective, too, for everyone out there, it's the same kind of deal as a musician. If a musician writes a song, it doesn't become public domain after so long. 40 years, 50 years down the road, it's still that that musician's song, just to put that in perspective.
Right. Copyrights, I mean, there's a lot of people object to corporations owning copyrights, and therefore they will be owned in perpetuity. But the reality is, you're creating intellectual property that has value. And if it still has value 70 years from now, why should it be free? If I provided for my kids in life, why can't I provide for my kids in my afterlife?
I agree. So I take
why
it
not?
then with
Why
you,
not?
take it with you saying that then that you're not receiving any kind of commission for any of your products being reproduced. That's a feeling I got anyway.
This is actually one of the pet peeves I have in my entire career, is that very little of what I produced in my career is something I own. Very, very, very little. And it's kind of created a contention, in a sense, now going back into doing art for RPGs and for clients, that I won't sell them all my rights. They get uses. And this has actually caused me to at least one or two deals where we just say, well, we can't come to terms on that. And we're friendly on it, but you
gotta protect you. So I'm sorry. I'm with you. As an independent artist, you have to cover you. You're your own provider. So there you go.
So there was a project I would have loved to have worked on, but I came to terms with the art director, but then the publisher, who is also a friend, basically said, no, we can't work that way. Sorry. So, boom. What are you going to do if you're going to make a decision? So I was going to go back on some of the software things. One of my wife's hobbies is collecting source code. So she goes to publishers, goes to companies, goes to other creators usually, and just finds out whether they have the original source code for the software they wrote. And if they do, she arranges to get it and archive it for the future.
That's awesome.
In fact, one of the things she does is she has tools that she's created over her career that allow her to take source code and re-export it so it'll work on modern systems if someone's interested. But she actually actively keeps some of these archives alive. They're not necessarily being played. She's not distributing them because she doesn't own those rights. But she does have the right to get that software. She does get that software and basically stores it away for posterity.
So it's like a library almost.
It is a library. And she's been given permission to distribute some of it online over the years.
That's amazing.
She did that recently with Doom for the 3DO. She got permission. She got permission from id Software to say, "Can I put this source code up on GitHub?" Sure, no problem. So a lot of people who are hobbyists have gone out, taken that source code, and they've been recompiling it to make it work on 3DO again. But it's a learning tool. It's a learning tool for other programmers.
So you said your wife, you mentioned a few times that your wife has also done a lot of game design and things to that aspect. I want to touch on some of the projects that she's worked on in the past, just so people have an idea of her scope as well.
Okay. I'm gonna say nice things about my wife, Rebecca Heineman. She was the first national video game champion in 1980. First ever. She played in an a sponsored Atari 2600 competition, and was the best Space Invaders player in the country. She went from regionals in Los Angeles to competing in the national competition in New York that year. And the other competition wasn't even close. So that was her first claim to fame as in software. A few years later, that fame got her ghostwriting a book on how to play the arcades and how to win at the arcades and win at the home machines. And she eventually started programming. She found out a way to make her own Atari cartridges. And that led to learning how to actually, well, first she learned how to copy Atari cartridges. And then she learned that led her to, oh, this code is the same code that's in my Apple II computer. She figured out how to program the Atari cartridges. And that led to her working at Avalon Hill. Think of them as the board game company, but they were the military board game company, but they were also publishing 2600 games and other computer games at the time. And she went there and taught their programmers how to program the Atari 2600. So that's her very early start. And we've got a couple of her game carts up in our little shrine in our apartment. And from there, several years later, she ended up being one of the 4 founders of Interplay, the software company Interplay that later on did Bard's Tale series. And is actually still out there, and they're actually one of our clients.
I remember back in the 90s, Interplay was one of the main forerunners for a while, too. They had the Star Trek game, the 25th anniversary game. There's Carmageddon, which was still one of my all-time favorite games as well.
Yeah, I remember that game.
That was Stainless and Interplay, and I just loved it. I remember that coming out, and I was addicted to it for probably years. I have the new version of it on Xbox One. So,
Yeah, she was at Interplay through, I think, 1995. So the first products that came out from Interplay, they're basically all her programming. Just she programs the first year or so of projects. And then she got more involved. She ended up doing a lot of the ports. That became her superpower, was taking their other games and moving them between game systems. And she's still doing that. That's been a couple of our projects recently. We Old School worked with a couple of companies about a year or so ago, and we brought back one of the Abe's Odyssey projects, converting it to get it to work on some newer systems.
You talking about Oddworld?
Yes.
Yeah, Abe's. I played Abe's Odyssey before.
I love that game.
It's a heck of a lot of fun. A hell of a lot of fun. I actually played the first one. I remember that on PlayStation.
Yeah, I think we put it on the PlayStation Vita, and I think on one of the Nintendo, might have been the Wii U. Yeah, it was the Wii U.
Wow. So once again, another impressive resume there. It's like a power duo of the gaming world.
I know. I can't.
No, it's a good thing.
Wow. Just wow.
All right, so now I'm actually going to turn this over to Matt, because I know Matt has a couple questions as well.
Sure.
I know he's probably itching to ask, so I'm going to turn this one over.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, because there's so much. I've been chomping at the bit and being very quiet and I've been behaving myself. I've been allowing myself small blurbs so I can calm myself down. Sorry about this, because there's so much to look. I'm looking down at all. I'm looking down all the list of all your books that you've been a part of, and I look back at this, and I've been playing with my friends for the past 8 years. I mean, actually no, 10 years, because Harley's 9, my daughter. Okay. And we've been playing with my brother Dave since my wife was pregnant with Harley. So, and he's been playing since he was 15, and I've been playing since I was 14. But up until I moved here back in 2000. So my friends and we've collected some of your books over all the years. I mean, my friend Mark, he served with me in the Air Force. He bought a lot of your stuff when we used to come. We always used to come back when we come back from deployments. Like, okay, what books are we getting? What books are we getting? You know, and a lot of the stuff like Savage Frontier, Mark of Ember, the Shaman. Pardon, excuse me. Like I said, the demigods and demons. I have gone through that book. We actually one of the gods that you included in there. Actually, I became an avatar to. I know, seriously. One of my characters became an avatar to a god of lightning and fire. It was so good. It was so epic. But I mean, what was your inspiration? I hate to go back over these questions again, but in D&D form. But what was your inspiration for like Ravenloft and the Harpers and stuff like that? Were there people you knew, or was it places you visited, or just stuff you thought up?
A lot of like Ravenloft. I think I only worked as a cover artist. I did cover and some interiors for those. That was my contribution to Ravenloft. Like Howls in the Night, that was one of the guys I worked with, or based on one of the guys I worked with at TSR. I'd been on staff for about a month or two. And I did a cover for one of Christy Golden's novels. Basically loosely themed on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Okay. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
The Enemy Within.
Yes, the enemy. Yes, where you gave that eerily shadowing over the character, and how you reinforced the darker side, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I said this.
So for me, that was just a cover, and I actually got to meet her last year. So the author last year, so that was really cool.
And because we went over so much already. I mean, just. I mean, the Harpers for me was the biggest thing that I know you from.
Well, that's actually Ed Greenwood.
I know, but that was like when I saw that I was like, oh yes, and then I was like, I know there's so much, there's so much, and I know I'm bouncing around. I apologize. Yeah. I apologize. But
so a lot of my contributions to TSR over the years, the Dungeons and Dragons, was literally only art. I wrote a few adventures. I edited even more, but most of it was the art.
Yeah, I know, and a lot of your art was amazing. I mean, I can tell your artwork apart from others, very much so. I mean, my wife, she loves looking at a lot of everyone's work. I mean, she's got Vargo, she's got a bunch of other artists that she does, and like when I mentioned your name, she goes, "Why does that sound so familiar?" So I went online and I showed her some of your pictures. She goes, "Oh yeah, I've been to she's been to the cons and she's seen some of your still work and some of your work." And I was like, "Yes, this is what she's like." And my friend Eric, who just recently moved back into town, he used to work at a lot of comic book collections and he used to go to Gen Con and stuff like that. When I mentioned your name, he was like, "Oh wow, awesome." I was like, "Yes," and I was like, so everyone's like, "Just tell me what happens when you're done." I was like, "No problem." No wonder why my room's getting hot. My lovely dog is trying to sleep on the vent. That's why the room's getting hot. Come here.
I understand. I had to close the windows. See, I live in downtown Seattle. And one of the things about Seattle is that most residential buildings, especially older ones like the one I live in, don't have air conditioning.
Yikes.
So I have to close to do this talk and keep the outside. I have to close the windows. So it's starting to get a bit warm in here too. Otherwise, we get street noise in here.
I can feel your pain because my air conditioner actually just stopped working yesterday. So I'm waiting for hopefully to get it fixed soon. But it works for a few hours, then stops. So I feel your pain.
Yeah, it's not really pain yet, but yeah.
But yes, yeah, going back to it, I mean, like I said, Christina covered a lot. Christina did. I know it's your show, so you covered a lot of the questions I had. But more, when we were first going to go through this, I was like, you got all the computer questions you can have. You can have all the arcade classics, all that stuff. That's all yours. I'll just do the illustration work and just some of the DM work because I see your work and I'm like, oh, that's. it's so interesting seeing the earlier styles and seeing that distinguished touch. And now I look forward to your miniatures coming out. So now I have to go get them, and now I have to go get some better paints and do proud and take some pictures and be like, look, see, I promised.
Awesome.
So now I know what I'm doing with my tax money next year. Yeah, I mean, all I have to say is thank you so much. And are you doing any? Are you working on any illustrations works right now? Are you doing anything of that nature? Or are you just sticking mainly to the computer stuff?
I am doing I do have a major illustration project going on. I don't think I'm free to talk about it yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But in fact, when I turn off this interview, I go and I turn on my Wacom over here. Let me spin this around. Oh no, that's Rarity.
I see Rarity.
I saw Rarity.
But I have my Cintiq over here. I do all my illustrations digitally now.
Awesome.
So I rarely even use a pencil pen anymore. But I can duplicate everything I used to do on the Cintiq with software programs. So it ends up looking like ink drawings, ink wash drawings, colored pencil.
Wow.
Which is why I do it that way.
That's that's awesome.
And then you're not stuck with stacks of paper either.
Exactly. Although sometimes those things can be good. I did keep a lot of my TSR work over the years and was able to sell it off to one collector a couple years back.
Oh.
So paperwork's good, but I've been hauling it around for, in some cases, 40 years. And it takes the responsibility of preserving that off my shoulders.
Okay. Well, thank you again once again for that. Christina?
Okay. Well, we're coming up to the end of our show. I'd like to thank you, Jennell, for taking the time out today and coming on my show to speak with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I do actually have one more question before we end the show.
Sure.
What advice would you give to someone who is trying to get into the game design business?
Oh, goodness. The best advice that I can do is to, one, study the work of people you respect. Try to understand what they're doing in their designs, in their writing, and then it's kind of go the Nike route. Just do it. Whether it's in computers, if you want to design computer game levels, work in your favorite first-person shooter game or whatever, and use the tools they provide to make game worlds and play and learn, understand things like flow and things like that. For game adventures, it comes down to just understanding what makes a good narrative, how to design how to design a narrative that doesn't have to flow directly through, that doesn't have main characters.
Oh boy. So
you're basically, it's study and practice. I'm still surprised that people are playing some of the first stuff that I wrote some time ago. And I look at what I wrote 40 years ago and I say, well, I could start here with this map. And I have. And I've pulled a few ideas out of older maps. But you learn things about understanding spatial relationship, understanding architecture, what can be done realistically, what makes a good story, how should a story arc flow, and then not feel like it's a story you're being forced to go through.
Okay.
So, lots of suggestions.
Yeah. That's actually pretty good. Actually, pretty good information for everyone out there. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. Once again, Jennell, thank you so much for being on my show. I appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for the show. And thank you again, Matt, for coming and helping with the interview today.
It was absolutely my pleasure today, I swear.
And I am that trans geek girl, Christina Tali, and y'all have a good one.
Good night. Goodbye, everyone.